Hello and welcome to I'm A Terrible Feminist. I'm David.
And I'm Theresa.
Today we were hoping to talk a little bit about consent culture, and actually it was one of the things we found in the comment threads of something we had mentioned earlier that I think Theresa really was near and dear to our heart.
Yeah, we were doing research for this latest episode for, consent culture, because we had a couple of articles, but David sent me some other stuff and I was looking through it. And I was reading comments for this metaphor for what was it, rape?
For rape.
It was a rape analogy.
It was the one we used in the last episode.
Yeah, the one about the philanthropist who had been mugged walking through another neighborhood with the policeman was like, this is rape analogy, and whatever stuff. But there was this comment from this guy. I assume it was a man, actually, because of all of the...
Their username was The Man, so...
It was so terrible. But aside from just being infuriating and uninformed and completely biased and ridiculous... saying things like, well, this woman lied about this thing, so obviously all women lie, because, one woman lying means that the rest of us are lying, cheating bitches as well, which, doesn't turn around well when you look at some of the men that are in prison and on death row. Because I don't think David is a murderer, rapist. What's another word I'm looking for? Psychopath. I don't think you're a psychopath just because, there's the one other guy that is that way.
High-functioning sociopath, actually. Not really.
The Sherlock references
that's a joke.
entail. But the one thing that really stood out to me about this that really made me angry was he had this paragraph where he said that rape isn't a big deal and women should get over it. He compared it to sitting on his seatbelt while going to work, how it bothered him at first, and then it didn't really bother him all that much by the time he got to work, and that women were making a big deal out of rape, and they all just needed an extra long shower. So, of course, as you can assume, I was infuriated. But it gets worse, because the next paragraph, he turns around and says, besides, women should just report it more if they want to do something about it. I mean, if they're so upset, why don't they report it more? And I went, because of sexist assholes like you that think that it's not a big deal and belittle them.
Mm-hmm. And it is very difficult for women to report rape because a lot of times the questions that they're asked are not actually related to the crime that was perpetrated. As we mentioned in our last analogy, where they're often asked what were you wearing? Where were you? Why weren't you with friends? Did you try to fight? Those aren't the questions involved usually in trying to determine why a crime was committed. I had a friend who was very young and she was being abused by a family member, and when she came forward, the police looked at her and said, look, we would really rather this be about attention. We don't want it to be about rape. We don't want to spend that much work, and we don't want to have to go through that right now. And it was just so ridiculous considering what she had been through. And the last thing I would want to imply is that all police are like this, because I don't believe that, and I have nothing but the greatest respect for law enforcement, though, when they get in the news in unfortunate ways, it is really, really unfortunate since they are in a position of such power.
That seems to be the thing for a lot of people that end up in the news, though,
Yeah,
it's usually the bad stuff.
Very rarely does someone get in the news because, oh, look at this great thing they did.
Yeah.
I don't think that most people are jerks, and I think that there are some good ways to not be jerks in the world. And that just boils down to consent. And that's the main way that we can fight rape and things, is if people start asking, and people start communicating, and people start talking about these things. In the last episode, we talked about how I usually ask before kissing someone. There was one time I did not. I was on a date with this young lady in Buenos Aires, of all places, and it was awesome. The date was going really, really well. We were having a great time, but I knew that our values were not exactly in the same place religiously. She was very conservative, and I was very liberal, and I had the feeling that she was not someone who would want to kiss on the first date, and maybe ever. And so I had just decided that I was not going to kiss her. And as we're waiting for the bus, I gave her a hug, and she leaned in, and I was like, what? And so I leaned away because I wasn't sure what's going to happen. And then I realized, oh, maybe that was an invitation. And so I leaned in, and then she leaned in, and I was like, all right, I'm going for it. This is awesome. And then she turned and gave me the cheek, which is totally okay, because I should have just checked. I should have just said, hey, what's going on right now? Like, I had assumed that you were not going to be into kissing, but now it seems like maybe you are into kissing, and is that something you would like to do with me? And if it's not, then please just let me know, because that's okay. I'm all right having that kind of a relationship.
Yeah. And I do want to point this out, because I have been told this by a bunch of girls before, where they don't like it when men ask. And I understand, sort of, kind of ish. Like, that can be a lot of fun, like, when you know a partner well. It's like, well, you know what I want, and I don't feel like I need to ask for it, and it'd be really fun if, like, you were in control this time. Like, I want to hand that to you and have a good time right now with that dynamic. But I think that is a situation that does call for a partner who understands and knows your boundaries and that you have talked to. Because there's a lot less room for miscommunication and accidental rape, even. Because, you know, I mean, there is the sort of rape that happens in alleys where somebody, you know, flagrantly disregards your consent. And then there's the kind that happens because of miscommunication.
It was funny that you mentioned that a lot of women say that they don't like it when men ask, because I was watching this great video by Lacey Green, who does these awesome sex videos, and the most recent one was actually about consent, which is one of the reasons I was so excited to talk about this.
Yeah.
And she was like, when a man asks if, like, it's okay if he can kiss me, I'm just like, yeah, it is, because then she really wants to kiss the man because he was considerate, because he thought to make this overture.
Yeah, but I just don't want to come down on women who, like,
who don't like it.
Yeah, like, you know, it's a preference.
Yeah.
I think part of it comes from the way women have been conditioned and what they think is sexy. I think the more we change that, the fewer women that would think like that. But I don't want to, like, invalidate their preferences.
And I feel like there are probably men who are on the other side of this post as well, who feel like they want the woman to not ask, but to just go for it. Because, you know, I think it's important to remember that this isn't a heteronormative society that we live. Well, it is a heteronormative society that we live in. In theory, it's not actually.
It's not like that.
Everyone is heterosexual, so it could be that the man wants the other man, or the woman wants the other woman, or that the man wants the woman to not ask.
Yeah,
and just go for it.
The other thing is that a lot of people are uncomfortable stating their desires.
Yeah, that's very true.
They're really uncomfortable. I don't want to be mean about this, but kind of taking responsibility for what they want and being open about it because of fear of being ridiculed or persecuted or labeled badly.
Well, and this goes for more than just sex. I mean, like, if you say that you want to be an author, for example, which is something that Theresa and I are both really interested in.
Yeah, that sounds like fun.
Yeah. I don't know how many people who are listening have said that they want to be authors, but a lot of people make jokes about the food service industry. And, you know, oh, best of luck succeeding with that. And this person who I was dating took a psychology class, and she said, oh, we learned today that most men who want to be authors aren't usually successful until their 50s, which is better than most women. I was like,
geez.
Oh, no! It was the last thing that I was interested in hearing. But it's very prevalent in the sexy times.
Yeah, it's prevalent in society and in the sexy times as well, because, you know, that's a very vulnerable moment in time. You know, you're being vulnerable with another person, and it's going to hurt a lot more if someone that you've decided to be that vulnerable with is like, oh my God, you want what? You're such a skank.
Yeah, that would be pretty terrible. Gosh. I've never even thought of someone saying that to me, because if someone said that to me, I'd be like, no, I'm not going to be with you if that's how you're going to treat me and my desires.
I don't think people are usually that, like, that's definitely hyperbole, but where they're unsure or don't want to or seem weirded out by whatever you want.
Yeah, and I don't know if that was, like, I'm sure there are plenty of situations like the one you described. I wish that it was just hyperbole.
Yeah.
I have a friend who is not uncomfortable sleeping with many people. And there was one time when she was in Ireland, I think it was, and she met a young...
Now I know which friend this is about.
she met a young man, and he was like, oh, well, how many people have you slept with? And one of my favorite things that she said after, you know, she told him her number, and he was like, oh, that's a lot. It's like, she was like, my vagina is not lemon meringue. Like, there's not a finite amount of slices that I can hand out.
Yeah.
Like, it's good. It does its work. I like what it does. This is what I do with people. Moving back to desires, when someone says what they want, it's good because then everyone's on the same page. And when someone says no, when they're not comfortable with someone else's desire, that is an okay thing, but it can be difficult to say.
But going back and talking about desire, we're going to... Because we realize that we're pointing out a lot of bad practices, and we think that there are better alternatives, ways that work better, and that lead to non-miscommunications. So therefore, better communication between everyone, all parties involved.
Yeah, and some examples of a good form of communication would be to say, hey, is this all right now? Would you like to do this? I would be interested in going this far today. Or I would rather not go this far today. This is what I'm comfortable with. This is what I'm not comfortable with right now.
When talking to your partner.
When talking to your partner, yes.
It's good to think about those things by yourself as well.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
There is this tricky little thing called the heat of the moment.
Yeah.
And it's very persuasive, the heat of the moment. I have had a fair share of, oh, yeah, that sounds like fun, and then, like, not thinking that it was a good choice later or, whatever. And, like, there is a difference between going, oh, well, I made that choice, and I don't think I want to do that again, and I don't think I had much say in the matter. I didn't think about this. It happened, and I feel violated.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like it can go both ways. With one of my past partners, when we would go too far because we hadn't talked beforehand and pre-established boundaries, we would go further than either of us felt comfortable, and then afterwards both of us would feel terrible about it. And we would both
because you
curl
weren't
up
discussing consent.
Because we didn't discuss what we wanted. We didn't discuss our desires. And so it was neither of us really were... It'd be difficult to say that neither of us were consenting, even though neither of us were consenting, but both of us were involved in making decisions that later both of us regretted.
Mm-hmm. But there was no discussion. There was no discussion. Do we want to do this thing?
Yeah.
And there was no yes.
Correct. It was all
silence. It was assumptions.
Yeah.
Which is, I think that is the key thing that leads to sexual regret in people our age and even people older and younger.
Yeah,
and especially younger, actually, because you're just figuring out your own body and you don't know what's going on.
It's very confusing.
It's very confusing.
It's very important to know that in these circumstances of consent, just because someone doesn't say no does not mean that they are saying yes. That is not the sign of consent. Even, and as we've said a few times now, silence is not consent.
Silence is not consent. Not saying no is not consent. Yes is consent.
Yes is consent. Saying, oh yeah, right there, that's the spot, is consent. Being like, I guess if you really want that, that isn't, that's a sign that you should stop. That's a sign that, oh, okay, this is not consent. This is making them uncomfortable.
And I hope this doesn't sound like a beratement, exactly. I think that a lot of people just don't know what consent is, and they don't know how to practice it well, because we haven't been shown how to do it well. All of those romantic movie sex scenes, there's no consent there. Like, James Bond never asks for consent, he just shows up in that lady's shower, and she's all like, oh, yes, you're here.
That's exactly how sex works, everyone.
It's totally
exactly
not.
How it works.
And actually, like, giving your partner opportunities to say yes is a very fulfilling thing. You know that you're in clear waters, that you haven't done anything wrong, and that you're not going to get, like, persecuted for it, or, like, you're not going to get in trouble. You're not going to make your partner feel bad. You're not going to feel like you're a terrible person or a sex aggressor. You're not going to have to go to court for it, for any reason. And it's going to feel really good to you and your partner. And if you are one of those people who, like, likes to have sexy times without quote-unquote consent, like, you can discuss it beforehand, and that can be consent, and then you can have your whole act uninterrupted by words. But the discussion needs to happen, and the consent kind of keeps it clear.
Yeah. I think it is important at this point to go into talking about the fact that consent can be withdrawn.
Oh, yeah.
But, so, if you did have that talk beforehand because you wanted to just know what was on the table, what was off the table...
That's why you have safe words and things. In fact, I have a young man that I see from time to time, and he and I are not dating. We actually, when we began our little arrangement, we had to have a discussion about that because we had a good time, and then we'd seen each other again to go swimming. And he touched me. Not, like, intimately or whatever, but, like, just reached out and touched me familiarly. Like, he was entitled to touch my body. And I went, that's not okay. And he went, what? And I went, just because I have let you touch me intimately before does not mean that you are allowed to do it right now. You are not my boyfriend. I am not your girlfriend. We are not involved in a relationship. And simply because I've given you consent once does not mean that you have it for all time. And granted, that's a very different arrangement than, say, like, what you and Emily have in your partnership. Well,
one of us could withdraw consent at any time.
Yes.
And in fact, we have at points in times been like, I feel like parts of our relationship are going faster than the emotional parts of our relationship, and we want to take some time and figure that out without having everything else being confusing.
The important thing to do is to talk about it.
Yeah.
Because I didn't realize that there was a need for me to inform the young man that I see that my consent had been withdrawn. I thought it was understood. And he had a different assumption. And because of those assumptions, we had to have, I suppose, a more
Clear talk?
No, not clear. It's kind of like, because saying yes is nice and saying no is bad, quote unquote. Like a rebuke, sort of. It's like, you did a bad thing.
Well, the only other things that I would want to add is that you cannot consent while you are drunk, and you cannot consent while you are asleep.
Yeah.
And so if your judgment is impaired and you're impaired enough that you can't drive a car, chances are you're impaired enough that you can't say yes to sex. And there are people who have known each other for a very long time. I know that my partner, when we go out drinking, we know each other well enough now because we have talked about it and we have discussed these things that we know what is okay when the other person is intoxicated and what is not okay when the other person is intoxicated.
Because you set up boundaries and talked about it and communicated.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is a lovely thing to do, and we would encourage it for you and all of your partners. Mm-hmm. Not you, David, and all of your partners, but
I have lots.
You, the
just
listener,
tons.
and all of your partners.
Tons of imaginary partners.
Yes, all of your harem
of men. My harem of men.
Oh, yes, indeed. But there is this thing about communication, because now you might be saying, well, sure, I communicate, but that doesn't mean that I understand what the other person means when they're communicating. And there's this beautiful little study that was just done over in Britain, actually, about communication between men and women, especially concerning consent and the denial of. Mm-hmm. Mostly centering around the word no. Mm-hmm. Invitations extended by young men were then turned down by young women. Here's an example. Let's say David's asked me over for coffee.
Hey, Theresa, want to come over for coffee sometime, No strings attached, just come on over.
And I wanted to say no. Instead of being like, no, David, you're trying to get into my pants and I think you're an asshole.
What?
Because that makes me sound arrogant, in my opinion, actually. I don't like to assume that young men want to do me. I think that it is rude. I do think that I am the shit, but I don't like to imply that young men are sex-crazed animals that only want my vagina. Like, maybe there really are no strings attached, and David is saying that because, there really aren't. It didn't really sound like it did it when you said that, but...
I meant for it to not sound like... I used my liar voice.
Indeed. I don't like to assume negative things about people. And so I don't want to say, no, you're terrible, and that sounded sketch. I want to say, oh, thanks, but I'm busy tomorrow.
Ah, shucks. Well, what about the next day?
Well, I think I got something going on then too. But the point I'm making is that even though I am not saying no and not saying, no, I'm not interested, I am expressing the inability, which is actually interpreted by the male brain because of this study, which has been done, that's proved that young men understand the no that is bound up in that inability. The I'm sorry, I'd like to, but I can't, is understood as a no.
So how do the people who are assholes and don't want to listen...
They disregard the no.
How do they figure out which person they can disregard?
They figure it out. This is the really interesting part of the study, actually, and actually how we can combat people like this and cut down on sexual predators. They figure out how to target their victims by trying to turn the no into a maybe or a yes. Let's say some guy comes up to you at the bar and asks if he can buy you a drink. And you say no. And then he goes, oh, come on, baby. It's just a drink. I'll even, it'll be fine. The bartender will trying to, push you. If you waver, if you go, well, maybe he's going to keep pushing. And if he can get you to yes, he might be one of those people that's trying to target you for other things that he will originally get no's for and can get a yes for.
And the person who is at fault in this matter is the person who is not respecting the initial no. It's not the person who wavers, because they're in a tough situation. They're in a complicated situation. If they're at a bar, maybe they're already drinking. Maybe they just want this person to go away and think that a quick yes will do it.
Yeah, I don't think there's nothing wrong with letting somebody at a bar buy you a drink.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with letting someone drive you on a first date. There's nothing wrong with going places with somebody. There are some behaviors that I wouldn't do because I wouldn't feel safe.
Yeah.
But...
Me too.
That say, you do feel safe. Just because you've done something that might have put you at risk a little bit does not mean that you are at fault when something bad happens to you.
Yeah.
Let's say you go climbing on a mountain that is, really risky for rock slides and you get hit. I would say that was a poor choice. But... rapists aren't rocks that fall by accident. Rapists are people who ignore what you say and take something from you.
Yeah. One of the reasons that I was really excited to talk about this was not just because I was watching Lacey Green videos about how consent is sexy, but also we are currently in Seattle for the Emerald City Comic Con.
Woo!
Which we're having a great time at. We saw the live Night Vale show
Oh,
last
so great,
night.
so great. Thrilling Adventure Hours doing a crossover show with them. It's awesome.
And there were these great posters on the doors that said, ECC is a sexual harassment-free zone. Mm-hmm. You must follow the rules. And I saw a great post on Tumblr a couple days ago about someone who was in an elevator with a bunch of sexy cosplayers, and there was a guy who was making comments about them, and she was just like, that's gross. You're disgusting. And she said, you know, what I really just should have said is that this con has a sexual harassment policy, and you're in violation of it.
Yeah.
Do you want me to get security?
You want me to get security?
Because the guy just blew her off and was like, well, just because it bothers you doesn't mean it bothers them. Because they had left the elevator by this point.
Well, did you ask them, asshole? Oh, sorry, I'm just so...
No, I think that's an important thing, is did you ask them? Because there are a lot of sexy cosplayers at cons, and there are a lot of non-sexy cosplayers who you are going to love, and you're going to want to go and snuggle and be super excited about.
But if you ask them, it's going to be different. There's also a big difference between saying, oh my god, look at your body, and going, wow, I really love your cosplay.
Yeah, there is. But I think your comment about asking is what's important, is if you want a picture with that cosplayer, or that famous person, go ask
them.
Because chances are they'll be like, wow, like, that's so cute that you want my permission.
Much more appreciative.
Rather than just going up and tackling them and maybe almost knocking them into a fountain.
That happened to me. Oh man. That was at SakuraCon last year. I was playing Tamaki from the host club, and fangirl
from the Oron Host Club, for anyone who knows
yeah.
about other host clubs.
Oh, goodness gracious.
This is a different thing.
It's a different kind of host club. It's very gentlemanly and whatever. And but yeah, this adorable little fangirl was like, Tamaki-senpai! And came running at us. And it was the end of the day, and we were tired, and we were going places, and she manages to glomp me, and I catch her because I'm like, oh my god, running projectile thing, better catch this. And bump into Emily and Ainsley, and none of us go into the fountain, thank goodness, but it's very much like, oh yes, whatever, have a good day, princess, moving on. The point David is making is that if you walk up to a slave Leia, let's say, and say, oh my gosh, your cosplay is so awesome, do you mind if I get a picture with you? And she says, oh my gosh, yes, of course! And then you say, do you mind if I, put my arm around you for the picture? She'll probably say yes. Maybe she has a no-touch policy because of how much skin she's showing, you know, like a slave Leia costume, wow. Lots of confidence to rock that.
I saw one and I was like, holy shit.
Yeah. I saw one, I think I saw one too. I saw something similar where there was a lot of skin displayed, and I was like, you are a very confident woman. Congratulations, I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And, I moved on, because the point we're making is that if you ask, you're more likely to get what you want without offending anyone or making them feel belittled or used or like chunks of meat.
And this also applies to, for example, strippers and burlesque dancers, which I believe there were a couple of this year.
There was a kickoff event for ECC, and I got to go, actually, because I was writing about Night Vale and the Thrilling Adventure Hour, and so I got invited as press, and I was not expecting strippers. I wasn't expecting that.
Nobody expects
strippers. Now I understand why they checked my ID when I walked in. I was like, I have a ticket for this event, and there's an open bar. Of course, I guess that's why you're checking my ID. But no,
there was an open bar.
Yeah, well, it wasn't a very good open bar. It was very cool. It was very cute, and that was the word I used when I described the burlesque dancers to my friends. Is cute. The shows were very, very cute.
Who were the dancers?
I don't know all of their names.
Well, no, who are they portraying?
Oh, well, they were portraying characters from comics and movies and things. Like, the first act was a ballerina, and she was in toe shoes and a tutu and a bra and a crown. She had this beautiful little tiara. And she and her partner, because she had a partner who was a waiter, put on a show where she stripped him of most of his clothing and then rode him out of the off the stage while drinking champagne. It was cute. They were having a good time. It was pretty adorable. The second one was Aquaman, who had just been rejected by the Justice League. He had a little prop that was, it was really sad. He had this poster with a little tack on that said, me, and it was, a poster of the Justice League, so he was trying to get in, and it was really cute. But he sang Part of Your World from the Little Mermaid while taking off his clothes, and it was really adorable and cute. He had Superman undergarments.
I'll bet he did.
Yeah, he did. And then the last dancer, who, I have her card now, actually.
I know.
She was fantastic. She was Rogue from the X-Men, and she had a picture of Gambit, who apparently is kind of Rogue's... I guess they have a thing.
I thought they did back when I watched that cartoon a lot.
Yeah.
And was in love with Gambit.
They seem like a good couple. You'd have to like risks to get with Rogue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like her stripping is more of a threat and less of an invitation.
She started taking off her gloves and then her boots and stuff, and I was like, oh, this is actually kind of a big deal for Rogue, like getting to use her to take off her garments and touch herself. Mm-hmm. Or like think about being touched by someone. That's a big deal for Rogue.
Yeah. Rogue can't touch people without
because
sucking away their life force.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know. X-Men. Sorry.
Aquaman is self-explanatory.
Yeah. Aquaman is self-explanatory. He likes water. But yeah, they were really cute performances that had a lot to do with like the spirit of the convention.
Yeah.
And I was very lucky to get the card and to be able to compliment them because they were at the Night Vale booth, actually. Because I think the person, Danielle, was the contact person that I talked to, and she's the one who set me up with tickets for that and got me the interview with the Welcome to Night Vale and Thrilling Adventure Hour writers, which was a blast, by the way. But I think that's why they were at the booth, because she was the one putting on everything.
Yeah.
So.
Speaking of people with special powers, I think now is probably an okay time to turn to pyrodynamics.
Talk about I can't even do it. Power dynamics.
Power dynamics, yeah, those things.
Those things.
I think in any given relationship, typically one person is more interested than the other.
In the sexy times.
Sexy times,
yes.
Yeah. And whoever is less interested should have the power of consent. They should both be able to consent to things. Maybe the person who's less interested in sexy times is more comfortable with more sexy times, but the other person is newer. There's a lot of different dynamics that can go into this. Mm-hmm. The main thing is that everyone should have consent, especially the person who is not as comfortable with what's going on. They should be the person who is checked in with the most. And if there is a heat of the moment thing, I think it's really helpful when people just back the fuck away.
Go to opposite sides of the bed and talk it out.
And say, hey, so I was just about to put my hand down your pants, and then I thought, maybe I should check with that, but I thought maybe it would be better if I checked while not on top of you.
Yeah, or under you, or around you, or to the side of you, or wherever we happen to be.
Whatever your preposition of choice is.
Whatever your preposition of choice is.
Between you. What?
I like that
Twins.
one. That one seems, oh gosh.
That or you're being a unicorn. A unicorn being the mythical... Typically, it's the mythical young woman who's willing to be the third in an already heterosexual relationship.
Oh.
And if you're someone who has this workout and it worked great for you, I'm proud.
Yeah, congrats.
In a relationship like this, where one person is definitely more interested and is pushing for more, they should always respect the other person's desire.
Or leave.
Or they should leave.
If you're not getting what you need out of a relationship, it's totally okay to talk about that with your partner and say, hey, so I realize that this is where your comfort zone lies. This is what I kind of need. Is there a way that we can make you comfortable? Or is there something, I would encourage talking about, why you're uncomfortable and not pressuring, because there's a difference between saying, hey, these are kind of my needs and desires, and it's not, do this for me.
Or I'll leave. It
is, I'd like to know what we can do, to make you comfortable. Let's say David is the less interested party between...
Me and you.
Yeah,
Because that
obviously
happens.
I'm so into David.
I can tell.
I'm so jealous of him being with my friend Emily. But let's say David is the less interested party between me and him. And I say, hey, David, I really would like to kiss you. And he says, well, I really don't want to kiss you. And I go, well, I understand that, and I respect that, and I don't want you to feel as though I need you to kiss me. Mm-hmm. But I would like to know why. Why would you be uncomfortable kissing? And, of course, the obvious reason here right now is he has a partner, and that's ridiculous and silly.
Hasn't always been the case.
That's very true.
I think it's a hard line to draw between pressuring and honest curiosity, because I think it is nice to be able to get that why answered. What is it that I'm doing? Is there something I can change about myself? But that potentially leads to an unhealthy situation, and I don't know how to fix that.
I think there are a couple of ways.
Okay.
I think... Because I had to, apparently I'm very intimidating. We talked about this last time. I'm very intimidating when I'm angry or when I'm upset about something. And The biggest thing that I find that I have to do is make sure that the person I want to talk with is comfortable in their environment. With Emily, like, one of the tips I got was approach them on their own space.
Uh-huh.
But when Emily and I were fighting a lot our sophomore year, when living together, that was not a good place. I couldn't approach her in her room because it meant she had nowhere to go.
Yeah, that was my immediate thought.
You need to approach, often I think a neutral territory is better. And I think being lower than the other person actually helps as well.
If you're physically lower
like if
than
you
them,
are sitting on the ground, if they're sitting on the couch, or if they're standing and you're sitting, I think that helps.
That makes me think of something really, really fun. In Supernatural, Lucifer, when he appears to Sam in hallucinations, always is higher than him.
Oh, goodness!
When he wants to control him.
Oh, wow.
And then when he wants to relate to him, he stays on the same level as him.
See? It totally matters.
And so I think it, I think
it totally matters. Like, if you were lower, you don't seem like a threat.
Yeah.
And then the third thing, this is the one that works for me the best, reminding them that you care about them and you don't want to do anything to hurt them. That you always want them to be comfortable. Mm-hmm. And that they are your first priority. Mm-hmm. Because I think if you do all three of those things, you can actually engage in a conversation where a person can feel honest and respected and safe.
Yeah.
It's important to remember that and to constantly remind them that is what you want. That you want them to feel that they can be honest and that they are supported and safe and,
Yeah.
Because if you tell them that and repeat it and show them that is actually, the case, I find that people are more willing to divulge things to you.
Yeah.
And engage in conversations that are hard.
Well, I think the idea of a neutral ground is really important. Like, I love coffee shops for this because my previous partner and I, when we were starting to become friends again, which is not quite as much as kissing, but we had a lot of feelings involved and a lot of, like, natural physical cues that we would go to. And when we would meet up in a place that was not neutral, we would end up, like, sitting right next to each other, and, like, we would almost be snuggling, but not quite, and it was really uncomfortable for both of us. Mm-hmm. Like, neither of us wanted to be in that situation, but we didn't know how else to be. Yeah. And so when we started meeting in coffee shops, we started talking, we stopped feeling uncomfortable, and when we also gave each other time and space, which I think is a really important thing.
Yeah.
If someone has rejected you and you are feeling very, very upset about it, I think it's important to give yourself time and space to calm down. It's not the other person's job to calm you down, and you shouldn't be putting that on them.
I agree. Coffee shops aren't always...
They're not always the ideal place.
The best. Like, I think it's different from a case-to-case basis.
Yeah.
Like, for me and Emily, it was the living room.
Yeah,
that was
place.
Our safe place, because that way we could both go to our respective rooms. It wasn't a public... It wasn't a public place, and everyone could just kind of, like, have their way, say their things, and it could be good. Because I know that if I had done that to Emily in a public place, it wouldn't have gone half as well, because she would have felt watched, which would make her feel unsafe being that vulnerable, like, talking about whatever we've been fighting about with me.
Whereas for me, when I think about relationships and things, I like the public venue, because then there's never that question of, oh my gosh, like, what if the other person snaps?
Is something gonna happen?
Because you're in a public place.
That's
like,
true.
There are people around who you can ask for help.
That's very true. Actually, to relate one of my stories, that instance where I was driven to a first date and I was alone in the car with the young man, and, I said no to being kissed. And then I felt unsafe because, there was no one around. No one could see if anything happened. But, that was also one of the moments that I want to point out where people who... it's another example for why I think consent is important. Because he didn't ask me, and then he got rejected, and then because he got rejected, he said, well, it's just a kiss. Which was pushing me to change my answer and kind of disrespecting my choice. Mm-hmm. But I think it was a self-defense thing, kind of like, well, it's no big deal. I didn't, don't be mad at me, like, because trying to kiss you isn't a big deal, which is... that's ridiculous. It is a big deal, and he should have asked.
Well, I feel like in that situation, what you are describing sounds like he wasn't phrasing his needs. He was phrasing it in a way that casts the blame and his desire away from himself.
Yes.
His thing was, I'm so sorry, I just felt like I needed to kiss you in that moment, and I recognize now that our needs are not aligned.
But then he wasn't expressing it well.
But he didn't say that. Instead he said, come on, just kiss me.
Yeah, which... And I don't think he's one of those rapist people that, like, because, when a rapist? A rapist?
Death is not happy with that name.
Shut up. I don't think that this young man was trying to get me in bed with him against my will. I don't think he was trying to do anything horrible to me, because when I took him to a public place, to a coffee shop, and told him, hey, what you did made me feel this way, and because of that, we're not going on a second date, he was very apologetic. He was very, very sorry, which is why I think this podcast is necessary, honestly, because I think there are a lot of people out there, not just men, but women as well, who don't express themselves well and don't communicate well with people that they would like to date or, smush faces with or other parts with.
Lick faces.
Yes.
Face licking.
Face licking. But that is why I think that this podcast is important.
Yeah.
Because I think there are a lot of people out there who do things like what this young man did by accident, like without the intention of being hurtful or scary or intimidating or
pushy.
Unfeministic is the other word I would like to use, actually.
That's a good word.
That is a good word, considering our subject matter and our mission statement.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And with that...
Yeah, I feel like we've covered a good amount. Please join us next time.
For whatever we decide to talk about.
Yes, as subjects continue to be of our interest.
Thank you, and good night.
Yep, bye.